Hi there, Michael here. Among my many immersive audio videos, one tutorial series remains particularly popular even years after I published it, and that is my series of videos about using Audiokinetic's audio middleware Wwise in the Unity game engine. You will find a link to the playlist in the description below. This series continues to generate many questions from students and hobbyists interested in exploring game audio careers. So I've decided to invite somebody who recently went through this learning journey and is now entering the game audio industry to give us some first-hand insights. Today I'm speaking with Sienna, a recent music industry graduate of our college, and while not directly from my department, she took immersive media classes with us and I advised her on game audio and Audiokinetic Wwise. Our conversation covers Wwise, the Audiokinetic Strata subscription, which provides extensive game audio sound effects, and her experiences as a game audio student in general. But enough said, let's turn it over to Sienna. Well, Sienna, first of all, thank you for talking to me. I'd like to chat with you a little bit about your experiences in game audio, especially somebody who comes from a music industry background. But before we start, can you maybe briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sienna. I am a recent graduate from Drexel University. I got a Bachelor of Science in the music industry, along with a minor in business, as well as a minor in virtual reality and immersive media. I'm originally from Hawaii, so moving out to Philly was a big change for me. And through school, I found that, you know, music production wasn't for me, and I ended up pivoting towards game audio, and I really fell in love with it. So here we are today.
Yeah, cool. And that's what we want to talk about today. Now, I'm actually quite interested to hear your perspective. What actually drew you into game audio? What is it really that kind of you think is so attractive when it comes to working with games?
Well, originally I didn't really like first going into college, I didn't realize this was a career option. So kind of through a freshman year research project, I found that there was actually a lot of really cool stuff going on with music and games and just sound effects and that kind of thing. And then sophomore year, once I realized that uh, music engineering and production in a studio context really was not for me, I pivoted, and it's just kind of the fact that there's so many different things you can do with it, as well as the implementation side. And I think for me, that keeps things interesting, and it gives you a diverse option, a lot of diversity with projects to work on. So that's what I found interesting about it.
I'm kind of curious because you said that you're pivoting from the music industry major. Now, music industry is a very, very popular program in our college, extremely popular actually. It's one of the programs where there is actually a long waiting list for people to get in. Now, immersive media game design is something completely different. What exactly, how was it? How was this transition from something that's really more traditional music oriented to something that's actually a little bit more software oriented? How did you experience that?
It was it was very interesting because most of my classes were so specific towards music production and mixing and songwriting and things that kind of aren't super relevant to game audio. Obviously, they're tie togethers, but yeah, it's pretty different. So it was definitely a little bit difficult because my game classes for my virtual reality classes ended up having very little overlap with my music classes. But I've had some experience just through hobbies and kind of working with my dad on side projects while I was in high school. I had some experience with like animation and that kind of thing. And so I was somewhat familiar with the tools. And then in terms of like implementation software, that was completely new. That was completely different. And
So
the only thing
how would you describe the main difference between the types of tools that you used in music industry and the types of tools that you used later on when working with game audio? And we're going to get to the actual tools a little bit later.
um I feel like the DAWs and stuff for mixing are so linear, and just kind of, you connect one thing and it works like a bus or adding a plugin. But using Wise and implementation tools like that, it's a lot of options and kind of a million ways to do one thing. So that was that was the main difference, and just trying to figure out the most efficient way to do things and
So
connect
the
audio to certain things.
the non-linearity of the software that we have. I mean, in music
Yeah,
production, I guess there are some non-linear DAWs, right? So if you think about Ableton, for example, that is non-linear,
yeah,
but nothing is even close. I mean, just the mixing in Wise, right, is completely different than mixing in a
yeah,
traditional workstation.
yeah.
Now we already started to talk about Wise, and that's the audio middleware that we used, Audio Kinetic Wise, and for the viewers out there who are interested in how that actually works, I did a quite lengthy actually introduction into Wise on this YouTube channel. I'm going to leave a link in the description. But what essentially was it difficult for you to get into Wise? Wise is completely different in the way it is structured as opposed to something like Pro Tools or any other digital audio workstation. Was it difficult for you to get into that mindset, or kind of was that easy?
It was it was a little challenging at first, just kind of learning. There are a lot of buttons. There's so many buttons, and if you don't press one, it can stop you from getting sound and be super frustrating. So it was a little bit difficult when I first started. But once you kind of get a better idea of what's going on and understand what the program is trying to do and what you can do with it, it gets significantly easier. Plus, the number of online resources for it and just kind of audio kinetics, Wise 101, it's so accessible and it's a great place to start, that's where I started. And,
But it
it's
is
been
a
very
little
helpful.
nerdy, right? I mean, it's sort of it's the type of it's very. I usually think of it as function over form. Really, it's very technical, isn't it? Kind of in the way it is structured, right? So you have to think about music in a completely different way because
Yeah,
everything
the
is
U
non-linear, right?
Yeah, I originally started on like Logic Pro and kind of Mac, where it's super user friendly, super like press this button and you'll get this. And then switching over to Wise, it's a lot more technical for sure.
Yeah. Um, Now, when we talk about Audio Kinetic, one thing that we also used was the Strata service. Can you maybe briefly explain what it is and how that helped you?
It's a sound design program, and they give you access to a bunch of Reaper sessions where you can go in and see different layers of each sound effect. And like I don't know, they have like robots, they have quadcopters, I think, fire magic, water magic, like just kind of like anything that you could possibly want.
Yeah, so essentially
And
you get access to almost the entire Boom library, right? So it's actually
yes,
quite
Boom
quite a
Library. I
substantial
forgot
amount.
to
Yeah.
mention that. But yeah, you get access to a bunch of those sound effects. And then when you go in, you can listen to the main sound effect of a certain section. And if you're curious what the layer breakdown is, you can open that specific like sound effect session, and see kind of each piece, listen to each piece, see what they did to it, and kind of how they put it all together to
So
create the overall sound effect.
so how does this workflow work? It's one of the things that I never really have shown on my channel actually, because I always found that to be really curious the way Audio Kinetic implemented Strata. So what's the actual workflow that you used, and what's your impression about how useful that actually was?
It was pretty straightforward, like downloading the sessions and getting it open. We You just go to the Audio Kinetic, or the Wise, no, Audio Kinetic launcher, I believe.
The Wise Launcher, I
Is it
think it's
Wise?
called
Oh,
the
Wise
Wise
Launcher.
Launcher.
Okay, sorry. Wise Launcher. And then download each section that you're interested in. And then from there, you can open the project file. And I wasn't super familiar with Reaper, so that was all new to me. And I found it just kind of the interface very different from any other DAW I'd used, which was a bit of an adjustment. But it was pretty, like, once I got the hang of it, it got easier to kind of understand what was happening. And then Also, I highly recommend watching the videos because they have a bunch of online class type things, explanations for what the sessions are and what you can do with them. And I didn't watch them until like a couple weeks after I started messing with the Strata project files, and the videos, believe it or not, were very helpful. So
So
I
for
would
anybody
maybe
out there,
start with that or do
yeah.
it and watch them in tandem.
Yeah,
Hindsight is
because
2020.
it is one of those things that I always found is actually quite interesting. The way they implemented that through Reaper, it's not immediately accessible. So it's one of those,
Yeah.
as Wise in general is not really immediately accessible. So it is a very complex piece of software, and the Strata kind of thing is very similar in that aspect, in that it's also not particularly kind of straightforward to use, right? But kind of, yeah, I do agree. Essentially, they have a lot of really useful resources out there. So kind of for you learning how to work with game audio, was that a useful resource, do you think, or kind of was it necessary? Kind of how do you think about that?
I would say it was definitely more useful in terms of learning about sound design and just kind of overall understanding of the workflow that you can have. And I think one of its main benefits to me was that it can be really hard to find resources to just get a better idea of what kind of elements people are using, what sound design can look like. And obviously it's not a one size fits all, but it's nice to have that as an option and perspective. And so I thought that was really helpful in sound design. And then exporting was really, once you learn how to do it, it's really easy. And it can really speed up the workflow, but definitely takes a little bit of adjustment compared to other DAWs I've used.
Yeah, it's I never really fully got the handle on it, I have to admit. But kind of I see the value essentially. It's also not that particularly expensive for students, so it's actually quite accessible.
Yeah, that
Um,
was the other thing, is it's relatively affordable and you can definitely get what you need out of it probably within a month of using it. So it's interesting to see how their subscription model changes and adjusts as time goes on. But
yeah, when they started, it was actually really expensive, and that was one of the things that I told them. Essentially, they need to have some access to students, and then they implemented that, and now I think it's actually useful. Now, one question that I get very, very often is with respect to certifications. Kind of, we never really did a certification. I'm kind of curious because you're in the process of preparing yourself for a job search. So that's what you're currently doing. And you might not yet kind of have the full insight into that, but what's your opinion about certifications? If people ask me, should I get a WISE certification? Is this something you think is useful or not?
I think it's definitely a good thing to have. I don't have it, and I don't think it's going to negatively impact me too much because I have, projects that show I can work with Wise, and I think that's what companies are looking for in the long run, is what can you actually do. But the certification, I think, shows you can finish something, which is always a good thing to have. And then it shows that you have used it and you've been messing with the tools and you're at least aware of how to do certain things, and you've proved it through the certification. So I don't think
Yeah,
it's a bad thing to have.
that's a very interesting take that you have there. I've never thought about it that way actually. You're right. I mean, in the end, it's going to probably be the portfolios or the portfolio pieces that you've created that kind of demonstrate what you can do. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a certification shows that you have completed something. So that's a very, very good point.
That's what my dad always told me about college. So, even if you don't get the degree in what you want to do specifically, showing that you did finish something and, completed it is always
That's very good
a good
advice.
feature. Yes,
I'm
yes.
going to use that in the future. I kind of you can tell your dad. Now, if somebody kind of obviously not a lot of people have the the ability or the means to actually go into a program like the one that you went through and are really interested in kind of getting their foot into how to work with audio and game design. So if there's somebody starting from scratch, what would you recommend that they do? What should they do in order to kind of start learning about these things?
Roll up your sleeves and get into it, honestly. That sounds really cliche, but I think one of the main things that helped me in my co-op search was the fact that I was doing things like projects and actively trying to work on gaming audio, and just kind of experimenting and trying to self drive my learning process. And I think that definitely helped me stand apart. It was still really difficult, though. I will say that. I think for anyone who doesn't know, Drexel has the co-op program, and basically what that is a school required internship slash job, whatever you want to call it, where you have to go out and work somewhere. I think specific to your major, right? Or at least relevant, mostly relevant.
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. In 97% of cases, I think it works that way, but not always, right? But that's sort of the idea. It's supposed to be in your field.
Yeah, just so yeah, get job experience while you're in school. And yeah, so I did my first co-op at a music studio, and it was cool. It was great. Definitely not for me, but I learned a ton. And shout out to all of the people at Milk Boy. But yeah, the second co-op I had, I wanted to do game audio, and I started my search in February. Our school year ends in June, and I did not find anything until, and this was in 2023. I did not find anything until mid-May. No, the end of May. So I had 2 weeks to pack up all my stuff and move to where my co-op was. But yeah, it's really difficult to get into, especially kind of with how fickle the industry is, and just got to keep going. You got to keep looking. I was about to give up on. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I'm kind of curious. What was it in the end that you think helped you kind of secure that co-op position?
Well, I think it was partially helpful that I was in a college, because a lot of companies look for, students who are not in the industry, and trying to learn, so they can do kind of a mentorship program, because this industry seems to be really, open to teaching and mentoring. So I think that was part of it. It was also unpaid, so I didn't really cost them anything except time, which probably helped them. Not everyone is in a position to spend 3 months in a city where they have to move, pay rent, and all of that, and work full time for no money. So that was another difficult part, and I'm sure there are ways of getting around that. But yeah, it's difficult. It's not easy, and I was about to give up on my co-op search and just stay at the same studio and kind of learn what I could. But I think I texted my friend. I was like, dude, should I throw in the towel? It was Sunday. And then the people, I worked at SoundLab, a keyword studio in LA, and they are fantastic. I learned so much. But yeah, the manager responded to my LinkedIn message on Monday, right after I was about to give up. So don't give up. Keep trying.
Don't give up. Keep trying. That's a very good advice. That's a very good advice. And at that position, what was your work? What did you do there? Did you work with any middleware, or kind of what exactly was your job there?
I mainly got to do sound design there. They kind of had a room that wasn't being used, and so I got to spend my summer in there doing whatever I wanted, really. So I did a lot of redesigns, and I could go into other people's rooms and kind of watch and shadow them. So I got to see some pretty big, some AAA games, and I got to see the Wise projects and kind of learn how they would implement certain sounds and how they would test the sounds and how big Wwise sessions can get. They're kind of insane. So that was really interesting. There were a couple VR games that I got to look at, and yeah, they were gearing up for Transformers 1 has been released, right? The trailer.
I honestly don't know.
Pretty sure it's out. We might have to edit that part out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. All right, we're good. I was like, I definitely saw the trailer. But yeah, so they were gearing up for that, and I got to see, kind of how they set up for when the movie was locked and they could start actually rolling. And it was like robot footsteps and naming robot footsteps and classifying robot footsteps in, metadata, file management. It was really cool. I learned so much. It was honestly invaluable.
And the fact that you came sort of from a music production or music industry background probably helped, right? So the skills that you gained in the studio, I would assume, became also important in what you did there, right?
Yeah, definitely having knowledge of Pro Tools and or any DAW, but they used Pro Tools a lot there. Someone used Reaper, and they were learning how to use Reaper, so that's another good one. Any DAW that you can use and show that you understand, sound design software definitely helps. So yeah, Pro Tools helped. And then my knowledge of Wwise, I think I redid like half of the Wwise course just to refresh it, because some things weren't making sense. And I was like, okay, let's go back. So I took some time to do that. And we used SoundMiner, which is something I'd never heard of prior to the internship. That is not cheap. SoundMiner is very expensive. It's a great tool. They have the Radium part of it, and very helpful. Very good to know if you can afford it, and if not, it's relatively easy to learn the basics of.
So SoundMiner is, for those who don't know, is a database management or a sound database management system that allows you to do some mining on sounds. That's essentially exactly what it's called. SoundMiner,
pretty much. But the nice thing about SoundMiner is the access to the metadata. So if people tag their audio files well, and when you record it, kind of notate it well, that makes life easier in the future, and you can find it in SoundLab rather than losing it in a 12 terabyte sound library. So
yeah, that tends to be an issue. So from that experience, if somebody who does not have access to college, right? Because we do have a lot of people watching this who just don't have the means to do that. So what's the best way to prepare yourself, other than kind of what we already said? That is kind of just keep at it. What tools should they kind of start with?
Wwise would be great. I would learn Wwise when you have time. I would learn one DAW, maybe two, if you can. I know there are a couple, like Reaper. Reaper's relatively affordable. That one would be good to learn. I don't know too much about Fmod, but that's another resource that just kind of any middleware. I would learn one middleware, one DAW, and get good at them. And then along with that, I would do redesigns. I would, if you can download Unity or Unreal Engine 5, make a level, make a game. There are YouTube videos. It's pretty approachable if you can follow tutorials. I am by no means a Blueprint master. I am by no means someone who's good at C#, C++, all that stuff. I took one Python class and it was kind of hard. So, yeah, I would just do as much as you can with the resources available.
And the nice thing is that these resources are usually very affordable, and many of them actually free, right? So you can download Unreal Engine for free. You can download Unity for free. Reaper is technically not free, although many people use it as if it would be free, because it just nags you to kind of register it if you don't register it. And you can download Wwise for free. Fmod also, that's another middleware you can download for free. So that's actually one of the things that I think is really unique in that particular space, that you actually have access to all the professional tools for pretty much nothing, really, and also a lot of resources out there, right? So did you you already said that you used the Wise learning resources when it comes to Strata? Did you also use other learning resources that you can recommend?
YouTube. There's a lot of interesting and helpful YouTube videos out there. Yeah, like you said, Strata was really helpful. Uh, Sometimes ChatGPT can be kind of helpful if you're confused on like a specific question with Unity or Unreal blueprints and that kind of thing. And reaching out to people in the industry too. If you have any contacts or if you're in any Discord servers, that's a great way to reach out, because one thing I've seen is that most of the people in this industry, like game audio specifically, don't gatekeep. They're very willing to teach and to help. But they're also very busy, so keep that in mind. If they don't respond, it's probably not personal. It's yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
balance.
true. That is true. And for many people working in that field, that is always a little bit of a challenge to network, because we have many people who just kind of value sort of the idea of working alone, right? But networking is critical, and you're absolutely right. It's an industry where everybody is really approachable, but also really busy. So kind of just don't be upset if people don't kind of respond immediately. Now, my understanding is that you just started your final job search, but since you already kind of went through that process during the co-op, I was wondering if you had some insights on what type of skills are kind of currently really in demand, or what are the things that people should look at if they are interested in entering that industry.
I think right now my goal is to be multifaceted, because this industry is so fickle. Some mentors I've had were recently laid off, and they're kind of some of the best, and they were laid off. So not only am I about to compete with other people who are just starting out, but also some of the top people in the industry. And my only draw is that I'm probably cheaper than them. So less experience, but cheaper. So um yeah, I think being multifaceted, we'll see how that works out for me, but I'm guessing kind of my background in virtual reality and understanding of animation and that kind of thing might help. I can at least talk to animators, so maybe that'll help. And then I've been watching Real Talk on YouTube, REEL, like Portfolio Real Talk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by Power Up Audio, and it's fantastic. So anyone interested in kind of putting together portfolios, putting yourself out there, applying for jobs, I would highly, highly, highly recommend watching this series. It's just like an usually hour to hour and a half long video where they go over people's websites, their portfolios, and critique them and say, tell them what can be improved. And I haven't actually joined a live stream. I want to do that, but we'll see if time zones work out. But they're so helpful, and they give great advice just for people. They're looking at it from a perspective of hiring them because they're in the industry. And yeah, it's an incredible resource. Definitely check it out.
So I'm going to leave a link to that in the description, so for anybody to kind of watch that. But you said something that's really important, I think, and that is diversify your skill set. I think that's really important. That's actually one of the issues that we see quite often with students coming in today, that they have such a fixed understanding or such a narrow vision of what their future is going to look like. You honestly don't know, right? I mean, there are many different things. I mean, it could look completely different to what you thought before. So the more you can actually diversify your skill set, the better. So try different things, kind of work with different technologies, and showcase that in a good portfolio. And your recommendation to kind of to that podcast is a good one, because it gives you some idea where and how such a portfolio should be constructed so that it becomes interesting for the industry. If you could go back and give yourself advice, would you do different today that you know how things worked out?
I think I would, and it's something I could still work on and will be working on, but I think, while I was still in school, doing more with the implementation and messing with Unreal Engine and making, more levels back when I was in school and around people who were doing it and just kind of using my student community to help me learn, I think that would have been very, very valuable. And I did not do that. Or as much as I should have at least. So I think I would go tell freshman me to do a little more,
Do a little more.
but do a little more. Yeah. But I think, again, that's something that, I can work on now. And I do have those school connections that I can reach out to. But it's a little bit harder from the middle of the ocean and not being in the same kind of facilities and spaces as everyone.
Yeah, it's kind of I see that actually a lot, and kind of to some in some ways I also understand that it might even be a little bit overwhelming, and it also depends on the personality of different people, and later you find out, hey, that would have been a good thing to do. I would also say that to not stress too much out about those things. As you said, essentially you can always catch up, and kind of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to really think back and say, if I would have done that differently, things would look different. They would look different, but not necessarily better. It's always kind of that thing. So I think you're in a good spot. So we're already close to wrapping things up. Are there any additional advice that you would give current students interested in game audio careers? Anything we didn't talk so far?
Kind of like what I just said, especially for students, just get involved. And even if you're not a student, game jams, finding people to work on projects with. My senior project, I actually took an itch.io game that didn't have sound and downloaded it, learned how to use Unity, and then added sound to it. Unfortunately, I used Y, so I couldn't send it to itch.io and re-upload it. But I still have the game. I still have a video of it, and you can hear the sound I implemented. So just that kind of thing. I know there are some online resources where you can download like full versions of games and mess with the Y session and look at what people are doing. That's another thing that the Real Talk YouTube series is helpful with, is they point you to a lot of resources and just kind of mention them offhandedly. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. That would have been really helpful to know. So kind of watching videos and doing that kind of thing earlier on would be good. Or starting now, the best time to start was yesterday, but second best is today, whatever that saying is,
That's a good point. That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, no, I think just finding resources can be difficult, and if you can go to a community or again, Real Talk. Huge fan. Definitely, I'm gonna keep plugging that. But it's a great place to kind of consolidate where resources are and information about that, or at least find consolidated information. Because that was one thing I did struggle with a little bit, was I was like, oh, I don't know. If you just kind of look up like game audio sessions, I couldn't find anything. Maybe it was a skill issue with the searching. But it was hard to find games that you could go into and see the projects on, and they're out there. They exist. So they're a good resource to look into.
Well, thanks very much for talking to me. If you don't mind, at some later point, I would like to come back and kind of talk to you about how successful your career search was. I know that you just started that process. Kind of if anybody is interested in sort of how things are essentially turning out with game audio, just get in touch with us and we can certainly help. And thanks again for kind of talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun. It was good to catch up.
Well, that's everything for today. As always, if you have any questions, either leave them in the comment section below or join our free Discord server. An invite link is in the description as well. There are many helpful people there that can help you with almost any question that you might have. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay updated about anything related to immersive audio and game audio production. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next video.